Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. First, I want to send blessings and prayers down to Wrangell, Alaska. They had a landslide that has taken some lives with a weather system that moved in. Tragic stuff, some children. It just sad stuff. Anyway, prayers to them. What I want to share with you today comes from the Yukon River area. We'll say south of Galena. So Benjamin reached out a while back, and he had a real hard time relaying his experience, his encounter. So, I told him, don't worry about it. Just tell me what happened. We'll leave it alone. But he insisted on it being shared. And so, Benjamin is not his real name. And we'll just say he lives somewhere on the Yukon, south of Galena. Galena is the nearest hub where he goes for supplies and stuff, right? So this happened 2018. And nothing's really happened since, but except some squeals and hollers off in the distance. But so what ended up happening is Benjamin had put in an order for a new outboard, okay, because the one he had was his dad's. It ran great, but it was just outdated. It was losing power, and you want a good motor when you're running the Yukon River. And the style of skiffs they use are those narrow, long, skiffs or whatever. So anyway, so he put in his order, and he had been waiting for months, for this delivery. And he had gotten word from one of his neighbors that came by for coffee one morning at his cabin that, hey, your outboard's there. You need to go pick it up or whatever. So he's like, oh, okay, great. Now, his little cabin, he had a battery bank. He has a generator. There's no actual, utility company coming out to this remote area. It's just not happening. So pretty self-sufficient guy. His dad had started the place and he finished it and whatnot, right? Since his dad passed or whatever. So, they've been there a while, well over 30 years. Now, from what Benjamin said, the morning his friend came by for coffee or whatever, his friend told him, hey, there's some screams, coming from, upriver a little ways, because he lived on a smaller tributary to the Yukon River, and their cabin was approximately half-mile up, just to where it gets a little too narrow, and that begins their property. And so it was a good spot for them to have a little bank there where they can, pull their skiff up and all that kind of stuff. So his friend tells him, hey, there are some screams coming from across your little river there, but they were pretty near here. I heard them. I heard the screams when I was coming in this morning. And he goes, okay. And he's like, what do you mean screams? He goes, his friend tells him the Hairy Man was screaming, and Benjamin had heard stories and his dad told him, and he believed they were out there, but he just hadn't seen one. So it was just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll be aware of the Hairy Man, just kind of mockingly laughed at his friend, and his friend looked at him right in the face and was like, don't play games with the Hairy Man. If you see it, just leave it alone or whatever, gives him that advice. And so he just puts it in the back of his mind, like, whatever. His friend leaves, and he gets ready, and he takes off. He brings his little day bag and, his paperwork for his outboard so he can get it picked up and put into a skiff or whatever. And he's leaving his little tributary to the Yukon, getting ready to go upriver to Galena. Now, he said when he was skiffing out of his little tributary off to his left, it kind of comes out to a little bit of a point, and the channel kind of kicks downriver a little way, so he had to go down a little bit and then arc back up, going upriver. He says just as he was making that curve, he was coming around. The sun was just so that it was banging him in the eyes, and he could, all the trees were, rays of sunlight coming through it. And he noticed a dark figure in silhouette moving, and he couldn't tell if it was an old stump that he had never really noticed because the light wasn't right or whatever, but it looked like something dark moving. Thought nothing of it, chalked it up as a stump, right? He goes, gets his outboard, spends a little bit of time visiting some friends in Galena, and on his way back, he's coming back down to his little tributary where he has to bank a left and kind of make a kind of like a half horseshoe to get back up in there because of the way the channel comes out to the Yukon where they meet. He makes that bend, and as he's coming up, once he gets up through the mouth of it, he says he usually goes down to half throttle, and he stays on step pretty good and doesn't have to use a bunch of gas. You know, it's not like a raging little river or whatever. So he's kind of puttering up there, and as he's going along, he's smelling like dead, rotten something. You know, it's just something dead, and he figured, oh, great, you know, a bear got some kill somewhere near my cabin. Shit, great. Now I got to worry about a bear, right? Thought nothing of it. Had his moose rifle with him. He gets up to his little landing there, and he beaches his skiff. He ties it off, kills the outboard. After he kills the outboard, he notices that smell is real rank, like he's standing right on top of a dead animal of some kind. He's like, what the hell? So he grabs his rifle. He's like, oh, geez, don't let no bear come out of the brush, because it was fall time. The brush was still, the leaves had fallen, but the brush gets thick, you know. So, you know, he was really aware of his surroundings. You know, he's looking around. He does a little scouting, sees nothing, grabs some of the supplies he got, and slings the rifle, carries his supplies, goes up to his cabin, puts the stuff in there, comes back down. When he comes back down, where he had stood looking around and everything, there's half of a caribou corpse. Antlers, head, and upper torso. One of the legs was missing, so it's got one leg, half a body, and it's in a degraded, decaying type of condition. And he's in shock. He was just standing here less than 5 minutes before. Now there's a dead caribou, been dead caribou, rotted right where he had been standing moments before. And he's instantly got the rifle again. He's looking around, and he notices wet tracks, but he's thinking bear. It looks like a double bear step, and he wasn't really worried about the tracks. He was worried about where this thing was. He didn't want to get attacked by a bear, and now he's standing on the bear's kill. Hyper paranoid. So he jumps in his skiff. He goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump in the skiff, fire it up, and I'm going to rip back and forth up and down the river and try to run this thing off, right? So he does that a couple times, right? He's just, rah, 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 yeah, yeah, screaming the whole time. He finally circles back around, comes back up to his little landing. He parks a little further down towards a little more open and not right where that carcass is. And he didn't notice the carcass there when he came back. So he ties off a little from where he normally does. Benjamin said he got off and he had his rifle ready. He runs a 300 Win Mag, and he was sitting there. He's got the elevated mounts for his scope, so he can use his straight sights, or he can use the scope, right? Kind of a cantilever mount. Oh, not just an elevated mount to where he can use his iron sights. And so he's looking for this bear. He's got it in his mind, this bear, and he's got to run it off. Well, the caribou carcass is now gone. He's like, okay, it still stinks, you know, that residual stink. Benjamin said he followed these wet tracks again, and these wet tracks just went off into the brush. And so he goes, okay, well, my trail to the cabin's off to my right. This is going right along the creek. It's getting out of here. It's out of here. So I'm going to go up to the cabin, hang out for a little bit, give this bear time to drag its carcass away. He does that, and it starts getting darker, and he's like, I got to get the rest of those supplies before it gets too dark for me to see, and this bear may still be around. So he's just, you know, I'm gonna tend to it. Grabs his rifle and heads back down to his skiff. When he gets back down to his skiff, the smell is back, and he's looking around on the ground, right? He's looking all around on the ground, trying to figure out where in the hell is it now? Why is this bear dragging his carcass around? Usually they bury it under some dunnage of dirt and grass and piss and shit all over it and sit on it, you know? He's like, this is one weird, it must be a young bear. Doesn't know what to do with it, you know? So he's sitting there assessing what's going on. He doesn't see the carcass. It's not dark yet, but it's starting to get dusk, you know? So he's getting a little nervous because he's out there just with the rifle, and he doesn't know where this bear is, right? He gets into the skiff, and just as soon as he steps in the skiff, because his eyes are on the brush and everything around him, he throws his leg over into the skiff and lands on something squishy and looks in there. That caribou was now in his skiff. Immediately he's grossed out. He stands back, and when he stepped on it, immediately the rotten smell just kicked up real heavy. He's like, ugh. So what the hell? You know, what the hell is this? Because none of it was adding up. This caribou carcass is just now in his skiff. Like, what the fuck? He said he fought it out, dropped it into the water, pushed it with the oar to get it away from the bank, and it kind of quasi-sunk, kind of half floated, and, you know, the stream finally caught it and was, you know, taking it downstream or whatever. And he was like, ugh, he starts grabbing his baler bucket, which is an old coffee can, and starts dumping water in his skiff to get rid of the stink. And so he's sitting there looking around, no noise, no nothing, no birds, no nothing. And it's starting to get dark. So he's like, screw it, I'll tend to this smell tomorrow. I'm gonna grab the stuff I need, actually really need bad now, and I'll tend my outboard and the other heavier stuff tomorrow. I get the, you know, the other stuff inside. So he grabs that stuff, goes to the cabin. Benjamin said he before he went inside the cabin, he set the stuff down on the porch and fired up the generator after topping off the gas can, or the gas tank. He said his little Honda generator ran about 8 hours on minimal draw. He knew his battery bank was topped off, and he knew he could run whatever in his house for a good, you know, 5-6 hours with everything on, 8 or maybe a little more if he's just running his little TV and DVD player, right? So he goes inside, shuts, locks the door, was feeling watched the whole time, and he chalked it up to this bear, this young, it must be a young bear just watching me. So he closed curtains and all that kind of stuff, and as he was sitting there, he sits at his own table. He has a little couch and a little chair for company, but he sits at a dedicated table where he has all his ammo, you know, stuff, just his area, his little spot, you know what I mean? And he had a little TV with the DVD player that sat on the other opposite side, and he had a little stack of DVDs that he would sort through and pick which ones he was going to watch or whatever. So he puts on that movie Heat with De Niro and all that, right? He puts that on as background noise, and he's pondering, man, well, I guess a bear rug would look nice. And he's, you know, he's thinking this young bear is going to make a mistake. He's going to have to put it down. And he's just contemplating, what am I going to decorate with this bear? So he's looking at his walls and stuff. And in his mind's eye, he's picturing putting this bear rug up, you know, right behind where he sits. He's like, I'll put it right there. Hopefully it's a young male and not a young sow with cubs or something. But obviously something's wrong with this critter if it's dragging its meal around and doesn't know where to put it, and it ended up in my skiff. And he starts thinking about that for a minute. He's like, why would the bear drag it into the skiff? You know, it just, nothing was adding up. So he just leaves it alone. He ends up crashing out. The next morning he gets up, still remembering that freaking bear. Maybe I'll catch it at first light, you know, down by the skiff, and I'll just end it. Because obviously there's something wrong with it. It doesn't know what it's doing. I'll just put it down, you know, so I'm saving myself trouble in the future. So he gets everything ready. He gets him a thermos of coffee, and it just so happened he had another platform about halfway distance between his cabin and the little river frontage where his skiff usually docks up, right? And he was going to make a generator shack out of it, but it never came to fruition. He just ended up putting the generator underneath his stairs. And so he gets up, he gets ready. He's got pine saw for the smell in the skiff, and his ammo, a couple flashlights, headlamp, and his rifle. And he gets up on this little platform, and it's no safety. It's not elevated anywhere. It's right on the ground, but it's an open platform, and he's got open field of view on this trail, you know, roughly 25-30 feet from where he's assuming this bear has been moving. So he gets there, and he's sitting there, and it's quiet, and he's thinking bear this whole time, right? So he's lighting a cigarette. He's like, if this bear is going to drag this corpse around or whatever, my cigarette smoke ain't going to bother it. He's smoking a cigarette, sipping coffee, just looking around every once in a while. He'd hear noise off in the distance. He'd flashlight, looking for eye shine, nothing. Just as it's starting to get daylight enough to where the flashlight is ineffective, he hears a noise, a grunt, in the direction he initially thought the bear drugged the corpse to begin with, right? Which would be off to his right, the way he's facing this river. He said when he heard the grunt, he was like, what the, that was a pretty deep grunt. This must be a bigger bear than I thought. So with the light the way it was, he couldn't see anything, but he beamed his flashlight that direction, and he saw eye shine. He said it was big, wide set eye shine. There was a gruff, and it moved. And all he saw was darkness. He couldn't make anything out, so he's still thinking bear. Just a bigger bear than he thought. He was like, oh, okay, all right, that's pretty big. I'll go and retrieve my 45-70. So he leaves his stuff right there, takes the rifle, of course, and kind of watching that direction where he last saw the eye shine, makes his way back to his cabin, gets his 45-70, comes back. Sits back down where he was, and he's like, all right, come on, anytime, Bear, anytime, come on out. Come on out. Well, he hears splashing downriver, and he's like, I wonder if that's the bear. I wonder if it circled around, is, you know, gonna backtrack me. So he turns his attention to where he's hearing the splashing. The splashing stops, and it's quiet, and he's hearing rustling of brush periodically down to his left. He said it was about maybe 70 yards. He initially started hearing it, and it was gradually moving closer and closer. And he's like, what the hell is going on? And it's not typical bear behavior. You know, he's just blown away by this. So Benjamin said, as he's pondering how it's going to play out, because in his mind's eye, he's already decorating his cabin with this bear carcass, right? And the bear rug. He's already, mind's made up. This bear's got to go. Obviously, something's wrong with it. So he's just mentally laying out, okay, I'll donate some bear meat to so-and-so and give some to so-and-so. He's just already got it mentally mapped out, right? And I only chuckle because he chuckled at just the mind's eye, and certain things you just get, you know, the way it just doesn't play out the way you think it's gonna, is what it boils down to. So Benjamin said he's listening to this noise, and it sounds like just every few seconds a short little drag noise, and then bushes rustling, right? And it's just the weirdest thing. So he said he got tired of waiting for this thing to come into view for him to get a shot on it. So he goes down his little trail and banks a left, and it's not really a trail, it's a game trail, but he's never really made a trail of it. There's trails going away from his cabin, away from the river for berry picking and stuff, but none right along the river, just in that landing area where he'd tie off his skiff and stuff. So thinks nothing of it, goes on down. He's ready for this bear. It's light enough to where he's not concerned. You know, he can see well enough. He sees this dark shape just out of sight, can't really fully make it out, and can't really get a shot on this thing. At least, you know, he's assuming it's a bear, and he wants to get a kill shot. He doesn't want to wound a bear and then have to chase it, you know. So he backs off and figures, okay, me backing off, maybe it'll draw it out. So he backs off, he goes over, and he gets into this skiff, right? And he's cursing himself he didn't bring the pine sol to port because it was still rank. I mean, it was still stinking. So he's sitting on top of his new outboard because it's partially crated. And he's sitting on that, looking down this little game trail, you know, directly in front of him now as he's sitting in this skiff in the river. And he said as he's looking, he kept seeing this figure standing up and going down, standing up, going down, getting closer. And he's like, oh, this bear is trying to win me, and it's standing up every so often. And, you know, it's going to come in as soon as it clears the brush right over there, about, you know, 40 yards away. I'm going to drop his ass. And so he's watching this thing, and it continues doing it, but it's not moving forward anymore. It's just inside to where he can't fully make it out. He's got a little bit of time before it's fully light enough to where, you know, the sun's up and there's daylight everywhere. You know, it's dusk-like, you know. And so he's sitting there contemplating, well, shit, I don't want to wait all day for this bear. So he starts whistling to see if it'll spark this bear to come out with curiosity or whatever, you know. He figured there was something wrong with this bear, so he wasn't going to just do traditional, be quiet, let it come in, you know, that kind of thing. So he figured he'd work on its curiosity, so he whistles at it. And nothing. He makes a couple more whistles, and then bam. Immediately, he said he had whistled about 4 or 5 times up to that point, and this thing whistled back in the exact cadence, exact pitch, his 4 to 5 whistles right back to him in the same succession of time. He said it was the damnedest thing. He was kind of in shock, like bears don't whistle. So he stands up, he gets out of the skiff, and he gets on land, and he's looking that direction. And he says he notices this thing, it's dark, and it's kind of moving back and forth across this game trail from one set of brush to another, but coming towards him. So he gets a bead on it, starts yelling, hey, bear, bear, bear. He's hoping it would stand up again. And he squeezes a shot off, right? Now, He's not big on just taking pot shots at things, but he's trying to get this thing to stand up so he can get a good shot on it. He had already put it in his mind he's going to kill it. He just doesn't want to chase it, but he pops a shot. He doesn't think he hits it because he hears brush scatter. There's no noise, right? Just the ringing in his ear from the 45-70 shot. He said there was crashing going away, and he goes, oh, great, crap. All right, let me go get my 300 Win Mag. I got a scope on it. I'll get up on that platform and wait, and I'll put some rounds on it at a little bit of a distance. Maybe it'll stay in this area or whatever. Basically, he's winging it. It's not your standard hunt. He's not using his standard hunting protocol at all. And he said there was just weirdness in the air. He couldn't put a finger on it, just weird energy in the air. He goes back up to the cabin, just kind of cursing himself like, fuck, you should have waited before you shot, you know better, all that stuff, just chastising himself. Grabs his other rifle, and he decides he's going to keep the 45-70 slung over his shoulder and go back to the platform. So he gets over there. He's sitting back on the platform. It's getting lighter. He still hears a noise down over there, and he goes, oh, geez, I hope it's dying. Or wounded enough. He's really second-guessing taking that shot because he feels like an idiot for even doing it, right? So according to what he said, as he's just sitting Indian style on this platform, he sees this thing move and stand up. And at that distance, he was like, oh, okay, I got you now. So he's got that 300 Win Mag, and he puts a bead on it, and he's looking at it through the scope, and he's trying to adjust his scope, a little 3x9, to get it into focus, right? As he's doing so, he said it's kind of behind this tree, kind of moving. He wasn't sure if he was the one doing the moving because he was adjusting the scope, or if it was moving. So he stops, and he's got it in focus, and it comes out, and he's thinking, that doesn't look like a bear. And so he's debating with himself, well, I don't think that's a bear. I don't think that's a bear. And it dawns on him, he had been down this game trail before, and where these particular group of little trees were that this thing was behind, he remembers the branch that was near the top of this thing's head was way over the top of his head when he was by it. And he remembers his friend telling him about the hairy man. So he immediately light bulb goes off. Oh shit. That now things make more sense. This hairy man's doing weird shit with his caribou carcass, and I don't know what the hell. So immediately he's like, hair stands on end. He lowers the rifle. He still sees that darkness down there, right, in the trees. He decides, I'm gonna wait till full on daylight, and then I'll try to make noise. I'll do whatever I gotta do to try to get this thing away, or just wait it out, or whatever. Goes inside, of course, brings his stuff with him. And only thing he left out there, he said, was the Pine Sol, the bottle of Pine Sol. He brought his thermos and stuff and retreated back to the house. And once he got inside his cabin, he just shut the curtains, the door and stuff, and just sat quietly, put on his movie, right? As he's sitting there, he said that when he just had the movie going in background noise, right? He figured, okay, I'm just going to let this movie play, and I'm going to ignore whatever's going on out there. Because he was hearing some weird noises at first. He peeked out the window a couple times and just left it alone. He was like, I don't even want to know. And so just quietly sat there. And he started hearing this sharp, high-pitched whistle from a distance across from, he was guesstimating, somewhere across from where he parks his boat. So I was like, oh crap, I hope they're not messing with it again. Grabs the 45-70 and heads down to his skiff, right? And it's daylight now. And so he's walking around, he's looking, not seeing anything. He still smells the rotten corpse again. He's like, man, I got rid of that damn caribou. I pushed it in the river. And then the noise he heard, the splashing, swishing sound from earlier, finally started making sense. He goes, oh, it retrieved its carcass out of the river and drug it back on shore. Okay, great. I messed with its food. That's why it's still here. He's kind of trying to cross things off his little mental list that he's got in his head of why this is happening, right? So according to what Benjamin said, when he got back down by his boat, that caribou carcass was right back in his skiff. And he was just blown away by that. He doesn't know why it was happening. He just didn't know. It was dead quiet. The whistling had stopped, so he retreats back to his cabin. Stayed there all day, didn't come outside, stayed there all night, didn't come outside, no noise, no nothing. The next morning, there was chickadees chirping, there was more natural sounds going on. And so he goes, okay, good. You know, things are kind of normal. Let me go down and tend to the skiff. He gets back down to the skiff. The carcass is gone. He grabbed that pine sol on his way, and he was dousing everything, right? The only thing that had been messed with in the skiff was the outboard. The way his new outboard was stood up, it was kind of tipped over onto the side of the onto the side of the skiff. It wasn't laying flat, but it was leaned over against the other side of the skiff. And he was thankful because it was brand new, you know what I mean? So he douses it and all that kind of stuff, and he unties, fires up, and goes to his friend's house that had stopped by the day before, the 2 days before, for coffee before he went to make this run to get the outboard. Runs and gets his friend. His friend says, hey, stay here for a couple days. Just stay here for a couple days. Let that thing go on about its business. Just leave it alone for a couple days. He goes, okay. Left it alone. Well, the carcass smell and all that stuff, he said every once in a while when he moves stuff around, he can still smell that carcass smell in his skiff. Still doesn't know why any of that happened. He's still boggled by it. His friends boggled by it too. His friend's advice to him was, if you notice them, ignore them. Try to stay away from home for a couple days. Don't spark their curiosity. You don't want them to fixate on you. It could be trouble. They could break stuff. They could try to get you, you know, just leave them alone. So Benjamin has been practicing that since. Anytime there's weird noise near his cabin or whatever, he no longer stays there during the winter. It's just he had a knee injury and stuff and had surgery, and it was just too difficult to live that remote. So he's staying with friends in Galena at times, and then other times, you know, over in Fairbanks and whatnot. But I want to thank Benjamin for reaching out and sharing what he was dealing with. He said he doesn't think he hit it, because I asked him, I was like, do you think you hit it? And he was like, no, I really, he said when he made his pot shot, he really was more trying to shoot off to the side of it really than really try to hit it on, because it wasn't fully in view. And I mean, who knows, you know, that's it. It's whatever at this point. But I want to thank Benjamin for reaching out, sharing that with us. Again, prayers to the families in Wrangell that are dealing with that landslide and the loss of their loved ones. There's kids involved. Real sad. That's rough. Anyway, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully we'll be going on an excursion out towards Connect Glacier here, Wolf Point, Friday Creek, that area. Up by Butcher Baker's cabin from years back. He was a serial killer. But anyway, enough of that. Y'all have a good day, and we'll catch you on the next one.